to call to order the special meeting of the July State Board meeting and to welcome you. And if you will, stand while we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get started, I want to introduce you to the members of your state board. We have two non-voting members, the Secretary of Education, Johnny Key, and Stacy McAdoo, who we welcome. She's our Teacher of the Year for 2019. We're welcome and happy to have you with us. Next to her is Sarah Moore, who represents Congressional District 1, Brett Williamson, Congressional District 4, Kathy McFetridge, Congressional District 3, Sharice Dean, Congressional District 2, Fitz Hill, Congressional District 2, and Weta Newton, who is Congressional District 4. There are two who are not with us today in person. One is on the phone, Chad Peckman, who's also our at-large member, and Susan Chambers had a conflict today, and she's from Congressional District 3. So, is there anything else in the welcoming that anybody wants to mention? I'll remind everyone, those who come to the microphone and those of us up here, if you'll speak clearly into the microphone so that those in the audience as well as those on live stream can hear what we're saying. Before we get started, we have changes to the agenda. We, under Roman numeral 6, 1A, B, F, and G have all been pulled. Those were resolved, in my view, in favor of the student and were student focused. So we will ask Ms. Dedman if she will come to the podium and present, starting with C.
Okay. First up is, of course, the Brandon Family's Public School Choice Appeal. But before we begin, I'll go ahead and I'll go over our summary again, refresh our memory if you don't mind. Again, the Act enables a student to attend a district where they do not reside, and it's subject to certain restrictions that are contained in Arkansas Code Annotated 618-1906. The student's parent or guardian has to submit an application for public school choice to the non-resident district by May 1st of the year in which they want to begin. By July 1st, the superintendent of the non-resident district shall notify the parent or guardian as to whether the application is accepted or rejected. Each district will date and timestamp the application. There are certain limitations. If the provisions of the school choice law conflict with the provision of an enforceable desegregation order or the court's approved desegregation plan, either of which explicitly limits the transfer of students between districts, the provision of the order or plan will govern. Any district that claims a conflict does have to submit proof. We don't have any of those today. The law does set a 3% net maximum limit on school choice transfers each year from a school district. The district can also set standards concerning the acceptance or rejection of a school choice application, and that can include the capacity of a program, class, grade level, or school building. A district can claim a lack of capacity only if the school district has reached at least 90% of the maximum authorized student population in a program, class, grade level, or school building. The standards cannot include academic achievement, athletic or other extracurricular ability, English proficiency, special education needs except as allowed under capacity, or previous disciplinary proceedings except for expulsions. First up,
before we start with the cases, we'd like to be sure that since Mr. Peckron is on the phone, that he can hear us and we can hear him.
Yes, ma'am.
I can hear you all just fine. Thank you.
Can everyone hear him? Okay. Thank you very much. You may proceed.
Thank you.
Okay. First, we have the Brandon family. The Brandon family resides in Gravette School District and has put in an application to transfer to non-resident district Bentonville. Bentonville denied the school choice application, citing a lack of capacity in Bentonville's first grade. We have here the family, and we have representatives from Bentonville and Gravette. The witnesses will need to be sworn. Each side will have 15 minutes, 5 minutes to open and 20 minutes, beg your pardon, to present their cases. You may ask questions of either party and allow either party additional time to present their cases. I'll ask, after you swear in the witnesses, I'll ask Mr. Brandon to come to the stand.
Okay. With those in the Brandon case, the school people as well as the parents or anyone else going to speak in that case, please rise and raise your right hand. Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Long story short, my family's been part of the Bentonville School District for about the past 4 years, going on 4 years. We're going through, we started a building project a little over a year ago, and we are no longer in the Bentonville School District right now as we're through a transition process. Worst case scenario, we're currently in the Gravette School District. The home will reside in the Decatur School District, which it was supposed to be finished, but it'll be finished in another month or so. Today, our children, Reagan is 16, Aiden is 11, Christian is 7. Today, Reagan was accepted through school choice to stay in Bentonville. Christian and Aiden were not accepted because there wasn't room. To my understanding, our children have not been unenrolled. We haven't enrolled them anywhere else. So to my understanding, they're still currently enrolled in Bentonville. Don't know, how much that affects the 90 percentile. But within our family, with our schedules, everything we do is in Bentonville. Our office is in Bentonville. We, of course, work in Bentonville, go to church in Bentonville. We shop in Bentonville. Reagan is our caretaker. So the way it works now, she's able to pick up Christian across the street at school, go pick up Aiden, do whatever they need to do and get back home. So all of our relationships are in Bentonville, all of their friends. We're kind of putting all our eggs in this basket, and I appreciate your consideration. All the children need to go to the same school, so we would have to pull Reagan out, in her junior year if this doesn't come to fruition. And again, worst case scenario, we'd have to be in Gravette and then transfer to Decatur in about a month. So thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything else right now?
No, ma'am, not this time.
All right, you may be seated.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess I have a question of Ms. Dedman. It was my understanding in the law that if a sibling gets accepted, then the family counts as one.
Siblings are given priority under the school choice law. So if I'm the sending district, if I'm the resident district, and I send a sibling, then the other siblings do have priority to go, and for purposes of counting that 3% cap, they do count as one. The problem in this particular case is that Bentonville is saying we don't have room. We have reached our capacity in a program, grade level class, something along those lines. So it's the receiving district, the non-resident district, that is claiming a lack of capacity rather than the resident district that is declining to send and not offering priority to the sibling.
Okay, so transfer in isn't considered one, but transfer out is considered one.
That's a way to look at it. Basically, the priority goes, if I'm sending a sibling, I'm sending all the siblings, they have priority to go. But as far as receiving kids, they are individual children in different grade levels. You might say, I've got room in my junior class, but I have reached the student-teacher ratio maximum in my first grade class. That's what's happening here.
Okay. Dr. Hill?
Did I hear him say that his kids were never unenrolled, though? So because that's what kind of triggered. He said they never were pulled out. So were they bumped out because he was no longer in the district, and because he said his children were never disenrolled from Bentonville Public Schools?
Yes, sir. Now, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Brandon. My understanding is that your family lives in Gravette, that your children were enrolled in Bentonville school districts, but your family lives in Gravette, and only one of your children was accepted through public school choice to attend Bentonville schools. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay.
All right, that's that.
But we also corrected, we did not unenroll them. They're not enrolled in Gravette, they're not enrolled here, they're enrolled in Bentonville.
But last year, they all attended.
Bentonville.
Jennifer, I have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind, since we're doing a couple overcapacity today. And sorry I didn't already know this, but when we count overcapacity, is that based on a May 1st count or predictions for next year? How does that work?
Capacity is, it's not set as though the 3% maximum you're thinking of is set at October 15th.
Okay.
Capacity is an ongoing calculation of, do I have room in this grade or class or building? Maybe I don't have room on May 1st, and then I lose 5 kindergartners, and suddenly I have much more room. It's an
Right.
ongoing consideration.
In that case, does the district ever call a family? I mean, once school starts in August, you probably don't know until the first 2 weeks of school what that looks like. Do families ever get admitted after that point?
I
Or-
couldn't say on a case-by-case basis whether all districts do that. Under the new school choice law, districts will have a continuing obligation to let families know when they've reached their net maximum, but they now have room. They'll have a continuing explicit obligation to let families know things like that.
Okay.
But I couldn't speak to whether they have done that in the past.
Okay, and then as for that capacity, does that include, if a school district has multiple schools, does that include every school in the district, or is that just the school that that parent has chosen to apply for?
It should include every school in the district. What you're asking for is a transfer from one district to another district. It might not be your favorite elementary school, but if there's room in another first grade or second grade or whatever grade you're trying to go into in another elementary school, then the district does have room for them in that other school.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Mr. Williamson?
I think Dr. Hill and I are on the same path here. All 3 of his kids are in the figures used to calculate the 3% right now. Isn't that correct?
Yes, Bentonville's issue is not the 3%. Bentonville's issue is a lack of capacity. It's the room. So Gravette
But
School
even in
District.
calculating that, since they all 3 attended Bentonville last year, and I'm assuming, just like you are, Mr. Brandon, that they're still on, you know, the rolls there. I mean, why would they?
Bentonville might speak to that.
Okay.
Essentially, under the school choice law, it's 90%. If you're a resident of a district and you live there, you're theirs whether or not they're full.
Right.
Under school choice, there's a 90% student-to-teacher ratio maximum set for capacity.
Does anyone else have a question for Ms. Dedmon before we hear from Bentonville? Okay, thank you.
Ms. Sharp is here for Bentonville.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. I do want to address some of your questions that you have had. We became aware, the Brandons had cited an address for their residency.
Excuse me, let me interrupt you. Would you tell us who you are for the record?
Yes, ma'am. I'm so
It's hard
sorry.
to remember.
Yes, ma'am. Tanya Sharp. I'm Executive Director of Student Services for Bentonville Schools. So the Brandons were attending our school district based on an address that they had provided, and in March, we became aware that that was not their address. They had given an address for Bentonville Schools, and the family that resides at that address, it's my understanding, have always resided at that address. And so at that time, according to state law, we have to notify that family and the school district of their residence that we have students attending in our district that are not our residents. And so we did notify the Brandons, we did notify the Gravette School District, and Gravette, since it was late in March when we discovered this, allowed them to finish their school year in the Bentonville School District. And so we allowed that for the students as well. We asked the Brandons to make sure that they could provide proof of residency before the end of the school year. So the students are no longer enrolled in the Bentonville School District. And so they were not part of our calculations when we calculated our 90%. The Brandons also, they live in Gravette, and they also my understanding, is provided a school choice application to the Gravette School District from the Decatur School District, since they are building a new home in the Decatur district. And so they've provided 2 school choice applications. We were able to accept their older child that is in the secondary high school program. Because we are not at the 90% capacity at that level, we were not able to accept their elementary child and their middle school child due to the 90%. We calculate our 90% based on grade level. And so we look at the grade level, kindergarten through 6th grade, because you have those student-teacher ratio numbers. We look at the capacity of the building at the junior high level. Are there any questions that I can answer for you?
Ms. Newton, do you have any questions at this point?
What is your actual capacity?
For which grade level?
Both of the ones that were denied.
I believe their youngest child is going into the 2nd grade. At the time we looked at our capacity around the June 15th mark. That's about the time we looked at that in order to get our letters out by that July 1. We were over 90% capacity. We will go to our Board of Education on Tuesday and ask for additional teachers. Even with additional teachers in 2nd grade, we will be at 94% capacity. The other student, I believe, is going into 6th grade, if I'm not mistaken, at the middle school level. We were over 90% capacity at the time of calculation. We are at 97% capacity in 5th grade and 95% in 6th grade, even going to our Board of Education.
And did you use the 25 per teacher or the 28 number per teacher on the upper level?
At the middle school level, 5th and 6th grade, it is 28, and
Okay.
we use that calculation.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Hill? Ms. Dean? Ms. McAdoo? Dr. Moore?
Yes, I will ask what I asked Jennifer. I'm assuming, I know your district is always over capacity probably, but is there ever a point where y'all do in August, your enrollment, if it changes, you would notify parents that those slots would be available?
We have not, and the reason we have not is because we are a district of growth. We
Right.
constantly have families moving in, and so we continue to grow, and so we, at that 90% capacity, we are wanting to leave room for those families that are moving in.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Williamson?
I can't think of anything.
Okay, Ms. McFettridge? I'd like to ask Mr. Brandon a question. Thank you. Okay, she brought up a point that gave me pause about the address that the children were listed as their address. Is that where you used to live, or were you living or renting, or can you address that, please?
Sure, I can address that. So, to our understanding, criteria to be able to be in the Bentonville School District was to have, it's a pretty rigorous process each year to residency verification. We lease a couple properties in Bentonville, one for our office and some land. So the particular location in question was some land that we lease with a barn that we utilize for different purposes, and then our office, which is about four blocks away from Bentonville. So we going through this process earlier this year when we got the school choice information and actually communicated with the school, I was talking to them and learned that apparently there are some houses that are divided depending on the line, and the children actually have to sleep there, not just pay taxes on the property and be contributing to society there.
Right.
So both are correct. We did not reside there, but it was, again, we passed the residency verification through our lease agreements that we have in place.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Do you have, Ms. Newton?
Just one quick question because of the 3 different districts involved. Once you get your house built, where was it your intention to send your children to school?
Our intention, like I said, we were putting all our eggs in the Bentonville basket, and whenever we went through that process and got the land, poor planning. We assumed, literally our back fence is the Bentonville School District line. So it was an assumption, and we missed on the assumption. But we're fully hoping to get our children and to be able to stay in Bentonville.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And there was one other person that stood up to take the oath. Did they have anything to comment? Are you the non-resident district? Gravett? Okay, thank you. Do you have anything you want to add?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a motion? More discussion? More questions? It's too early for a break.
We're all thinking.
Yeah.
I'm gonna vote for the kids and, move that we grant the waiver.
Okay, we have a motion to grant the waiver by Mr. Williamson. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Mr. Peckman seconded the motion. We'll have a roll call.
Mr. Peckron,
Aye.
Dr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. McFetridge,
Yes.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Ms. Newton,
Yes.
Ms. Dean.
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion passes. Your eggs are in the basket. Thank you for your presentation. You did a good job, and I appreciate the fact that y'all were looking above 90%. That I do, in fact, and give our best to Dr. Jones. Thank you. Y'all may be excused if you'd like to get back.
Watch that property line next time.
Okay. Next case is the Puck case, also of Bentonville. This is a transfer from P. Ridge.
We have the Peck family from P Ridge. They are requesting a transfer to Bentonville School District. Bentonville denied based on lack of capacity in their 8th grade.
Okay,
The Peck family is here. All witnesses will need to be sworn.
okay. Will anyone who will be giving testimony, please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, you may be seated. And when you come, if you'll tell us who you are.
Yes. Good morning. I'm Jimmy Puck. I am Wyatt's dad. Excuse me. We have lived in the Bentonville district for 16 years. My children have been in the district since they enrolled in school in kindergarten. The plan was for them to finish school in Bentonville district. Unfortunately, my wife's parents are elderly, and they live, their residence is in the P Ridge district. We moved out to their place in order to help them with their land. My father-in-law, just a little background on him, he was a Vietnam veteran, a Gulf War veteran. He does suffer from some illnesses due to Agent Orange, and so his physical capacity is not what it used to be. So with this move, that's moved our kids into a different district. Our oldest daughter, Natalie, was accepted by Bentonville. She'll be in 11th grade. Wyatt, which would be in 8th grade, was not accepted. They do live in the same residence, so 2 different districts will be a challenge. And that's all I got.
Does anyone have any questions? Dr. Moore?
Yeah, so were both your children enrolled in Bentonville the previous school year?
Yes,
Okay, so this coming school year would be a change if not allowed?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll ask the district to present.
Thank you.
Hello again, Tanya Sharp, Bentonville Schools, Executive Director of Student Services. The Puck family has been in our district. Their change moved them into the Pea Ridge district. We were able to accept their older daughter because that's at the high school level, and we've not hit that 90% capacity at the high school level. The 8th grade, however, at the time of calculation, we were at 90% capacity. We are at 95% capacity now, and so that's why we denied the application, because of our board's capacity resolution that they had set.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Since they were enrolled last year, were they used to calculate the 95%?
No, ma'am. I believe at that time we had their residence on file, and so they would have been in the Pea Ridge School District.
Anyone else have a question? Thank you. Do we have a motion? And before we do a motion, I want to be sure that people, that the audience understands, we as a board are not choosing between districts. All of these districts offer good, solid educational opportunity for the children they serve. This is just circumstances, sometimes alter cases, and that's why we are hearing these particular appeals.
I move to approve the transfer.
Moved by Ms. Dean to approve the transfers. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. McFettridge. Will you do a roll call, please?
Mr. Peckron,
Yeah.
Dr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. McFettridge,
Yes.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Ms. Newton,
Yes.
Ms. Dean.
Yes.
7 votes in favor.
Motion passes. And I want to commend you for taking care of your parents. I know that they appreciate that, and I do as well. Y'all may be excused. The next case is the Harris case from Guy Perkins to Quitman.
Yes, the Harris family resides in Guy Perkins. They are seeking a transfer to Quitman. It was denied based on the Guy Perkins School District having met their 3% maximum limit on school choice transfers from the school year. We do have the parent here, Ms. Harris. I'm sorry, all parties will need to be sworn.
That's okay. Between the two of us, we'll get this right. Okay, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You may be seated. Parent? And if you will, identify yourself.
I'm Emily Harris. I'm the parent of Tegan and Aspen Harris. We currently live in the Guy School District, and I actually teach there. And whenever we moved there 5 years ago, we kind of went wholeheartedly, and we have a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And before our girls were ever in sports, we followed the ball team to state tournaments, 8 months pregnant. We followed them all the way, and I feel like we really just wanted a community to love us like what we could give them. And Guy is a great community, but after 4 years of education, I'm just not sure that it's giving my children what they need. The main factors that kind of concern my husband and I with our girls are academics, safety, sports, and the opportunities. My oldest daughter's in 4th grade, so she does a lot of the state testing. Her state testing is not hitting where we need it to hit, and her classroom assessments, they have just plateaued. They're not going up like they should at all. I know as a teacher where they need to be academically, and they're not getting there quick enough. And I feel like every year we've waited and we've said, we'll give it one more year. We'll give it one more year with administration changes and with all these changes that Guy Perkins is doing, and we're not getting there for our children. The safety, I know that safety is obviously a huge concern for my husband and I with our 3 children. And I know that Quitman has a resource officer. Guy Perkins does not. They have one that's a part-time. I never saw them last year. Also with the safe rooms, I know that Quitman has installed safe rooms in every classroom, and that is very important to us for our children, especially with the tornadoes that we have in that area. And, you know, I know also as a parent and a teacher that as much as we'd like to say it'll never happen, active killers can happen anytime, and I feel like Quitman is more prepared for that than what we can give our children at Guy. My daughter was nominated for the USSSA All-State for softball this year, and both of my girls are very, very athletic, and we have had to find ball teams at other districts, other towns, because Guy doesn't have that. They've asked us to play baseball. Well, I don't want my girls playing baseball. I want my girls playing softball. And so we've kind of had to move to find them places because we don't have enough children there for that. And so it's hard to become completely involved in situations like that. Like I said, my husband and I are just, we really want to be committed to a community. And my family lives in Rosebud, and so we drive through Quitman and just seeing the involvement that they have, the parades they put on, and the school activities that they have. We want our children to be a part of that. And like I said, Guy is a great, I work there. It is great. I just don't think it is right for our girls. And so that's why I'm here.
Does anyone have any questions for her before the district steps up? Ms. Newton?
I'm just a little bit confused. You said you're a teacher at Guy?
I am.
What do you teach?
I teach 3rd grade.
Did you have your daughter?
I did.
But you're saying the academics wasn't where it needs to be?
You're correct. My daughter has been in the same classroom. We maxed out last year with the classroom, and that's another concern, is that since kindergarten, this has been a massive behavior issue, this classroom. I don't really want to talk as a teacher up here. I'd like to talk as a parent. I don't know, what I can, do in that case. My daughter has received threat letters in the classroom. As parents, we have been to the board, we have been to administration, and nothing was ever done about that. Academically, the needs that are in our classroom that are not being met from outside sources and people who need to come in, it's just, both of my daughters were in speech. They were never picked up for speech except for maybe once a month. They're just not getting the education and the help that they need there.
Dr. Hill? Ms. Dean?
So, are you looking to move? Are you looking for employment elsewhere, since there seems to be an issue at Guy Perkins? Has that been an option?
Yes. My girls are young, and we want to be completely invested. We've lived here for 4 years. We lost my dad last month in Rosebud, and so my family will be moving to Quitman in the next year or two. My husband has a huge advancement at his job next month, and so we'll be selling and rebuying in Quitman to get us. That'll put us halfway closer to Rosebud. We don't want to live in Rosebud, but we want to be closer to home. And I know that Quitman has what my children need. I know this. I'm a teacher. I've done my research, and I know that Quitman is where my children need to be.
Ms. McFetridge? Mr. Williamson?
Okay, so I just heard you say that you all are moving to Quitman in the next month, is that what?
No, sir. We live in Guy.
Right.
My husband will get an advancement at his job, and so we don't want to
And
move
he's
in.
in his job is in Quickman? Is that-
No,
okay.
his job is in Greenbrier.
Okay.
I mean, he travels, but the main office is in Greenbrier. I think eventually that I would like to work at Quitman. Obviously, I'm putting my children there, you know. But right now, I wasn't sure where my children were going to be able to be this year, if that makes sense. I wasn't sure how this would get approved. Another thing is that I did school choice. I sent the paperwork in, and Quitman received it April 23rd. I received acceptance from Quitman the end of May. On July 18th, I called Guy Perkins to ask him what the status was on it, and the secretary in the office told me that it was denied, but she just never got the letter out. And so she then called Quitman and had them call me to do the denial on July 18th, which I thought was kind of a long gap there, because since we received our acceptance at Quitman, we've enrolled them in Quitman already. We have transportation to and from Quitman already. But she informed us that because we'd hit the 3% gap, that we were denied, even though we never received a denial letter.
Okay, let me ask Ms. Dedman a question on the notification to parents. Is that they have to address the letter to the parent by July 1st, or they have to have the letter in their hand by July 1st?
They're supposed to notify the parent if they've got the, let me see here. The parent must apply by May 1st. The district must notify the parent no later than July 1st. And once they have the information, they're supposed to send it from district to district within 10 days of receipt.
Okay.
Jennifer, may I ask you a question? So is it normal that a district would accept a parent and then later find out that it was denied? I thought they were supposed to communicate.
The districts should be communicating, but often the parent receives an acceptance letter from the non-resident district before the resident district has had a chance to communicate that they've reached their 3% cap or some other limitation applies.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Ms. McAdoo? Okay. Anyone else? So, and you did say you got the letter on July 18th?
The letter from...
Rejection letter?
No, ma'am. We never received one. I called to ask, and they informed me over the phone.
Okay. So we're putting a lot of onus on the parent, which I know they're looking out for their child, but we as districts have to do too. So do you have anything else you want to say?
No,
before?
ma'am.
Okay, we will get to hear from the district now. We all know you, but be sure and identify yourself.
Good morning. Good to see you again. Joe Fisher, the Guy Perkins School District Superintendent. Let me address that issue first, and I think it's in your packet, so I don't want to be redundant if you've already seen this information. Okay. But it was our understanding through our secretary that Ms. Harris had pulled that particular application. We had actually marked it with a Post-it note that said withdrawn, and so we did not notify the Quitman School District nor the parent at that point, or we would have, like we did all of our other applicants that had applied.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Wanted to clarify that point, that it was our understanding. So when she called and said she had not received the letter, then obviously we righted our misunderstanding and contacted the Quitman School District and verbally contacted her, obviously because she was in communication with us. So that was our understanding, or we would have already contacted her. As far as academics, I do appreciate her being a part of our teaching staff. Very much. We are working on academics as the new superintendent. That's the first thing that we're looking at, developing our PLCs as we're learning this week in our conference. And so I feel fairly sure that as we look at our academic scores that we will be working on those. As far as safety, anybody that's been through the Guy community, you will know that we have a police officer that sits in our front door and in the orchard there 24/7. So don't speed. That's the first warning. And second of all, we feel fairly safe, as I've communicated with him, that he is there watching over our building. We can contact him. He's actually the police chief. lastly, we have great sports, great softball. Would love to continue to have Harris family participating in that, you know, when they're old enough to participate in that. So that's all I have for you.
Any questions for the superintendent? Congratulations on your new position.
Thank you.
I do have a question for you. How did you find out that the Harris family pulled their application?
When I first came in, it was one of the things we talked about because we were looking at our numbers, looking at those that had met the cutoff. And I think our cutoff actually occurred in March. Hers was submitted in April, so we already knew at that point. But when I came on board, I looked at those. I looked at those that were employees. And so I saw a Post-it note on there that stated that she had pulled that. She had verbally given that. When I did my listening tours, I do remember the family talking about reconsidering that. I knew that they had submitted that when I did listening tours as I was hired. And so it was my understanding as well, or we would have already sent them a letter. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
This is Mr. Pekron. I have a question, and I
Okay.
don't think it's necessarily for the superintendent, but it's maybe for Jennifer or somebody else. What do we do when a school has reached the 3% limit to research or investigate as a board the reasons why a particular school district has a high number of students transferring out of it?
I'm hearing you ask, what can the board do to investigate why a district has met its 3% cap? Often when the district is available during a school choice hearing, that's one of the questions that we might ask the district is what's going on in the district. You know, why are we reaching our 3% maximum?
But that's nothing that we've done in the past affirmatively.
Would you say that again?
That's not an issue that we've looked at affirmatively, is why schools are hitting the 3% cap.
I'm hearing you ask, is that not a permanent issue that we every year have
No, I'm
schools?
sorry, I'm saying,
Let me hit.
I'm saying as a board, we do not currently have a policy of if a school has hit 3%, we affirmatively go in and look at why that school is having an outflow.
Commissioner Wood.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Pekron, I think you're asking if there's any investigation of, or do we as the agency independently verify the districts and their claims of 3%, and we do not. There'll be some cases later today where we'll get into just where we ask the district to verify that they counted correctly with respect to the net. So that's really the only thing, because the law says it has to be a net 3% loss. We don't actually go and ask them to justify the original numbers for the 3%, but in some cases we have said, make sure you're calculating it to account for the kids coming in as well as the kids that you are losing. So to help Jennifer, not that she needs help, but I think we were having trouble hearing what your question was. So let me make sure, Mr. Pekron, is that your question of whether we independently verify the 3% calculations and the reasons why?
And this is part of the reason I'm on the, I guess it's trouble being on the phone. But, you know, I'm wanting to know, like, for example, this school district has had a 3% outflow, and there are others that have had at least a 3% outflow. What I want to know is, when a school district has a 3% outflow, are we as a board thinking, oh, this is a school that must or may be having some sort of an issue that's resulting in the outflow, and do we look into it at all? That's what I'm looking at. Is this a school that's somehow in need of additional support or resources or something like that? That's my question.
Okay, Ms. Davis.
And we can have this discussion another time if it's more complicated then.
So that does not create for us, at least up to this point, any type of trigger to dig deeper. That is just simply a level at which, for the purposes of school choice, we bring that information to you as a board, but it doesn't trigger any type of support for those districts or looking into those districts to see why there is an outflow, that if districts want our help, then that may be something they ask us for. To my knowledge, that has not occurred in any of the 3% cases.
Okay. Yeah, I just find it concerning when I see something like this. But we can have this in conversation. We can have more detail another time. But I would like to ask the superintendent, and I understand your needs, so I'm sure that's something you're working on addressing. What are your understandings as to why there's been a 3% outflow?
Did you understand the question?
I think I do. As you may remember, our total population is under 350 right now. So when you talk about 3%, we're talking about 10 students. We're not talking about a mass exodus of 50 to 100. So I think that's an important point for you to understand. Second thing is, for a long time, we've had a lot of athletics in the Guy Perkins School District, well known for basketball. Our basketball coach has retired since then. There have been changes in leadership, that sort of thing. But the districts that are around us, and I commend them, have fantastic offerings for students. Those are things that we will be addressing to try to provide culturally, in our culture of, in fact, I'm looking at farm to table program right now that would fit our area. But right now they're offering programs because of the number and the size and the population they have. They can offer a football. They can offer different types of sports that we're unable to offer. So part of that is just part of the system and the numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
During the Lakeview case, when consolidation was being considered, the number, I think, with the discussions in the legislature and the people, they went from thinking a school needed to be a certain number of kids in order to provide all of those different offerings. So you might not have this kind of situation. The number they settled on was 350, which, people can argue that flat around. But the total number that requested to transfer into your district were 4 families, right?
Correct.
And the total number that requested to leave were 14 families, and that made the net 10. And so you have reached, that is your 3%.
Yes, and I think it's actually over that because of the same family rule.
Oh, yeah, right. You have 6 kids in and 21 kids out because of the number of kids within a family.
And I did find out in our office with all true disclosure that we weren't actually figuring that correctly, so we may have let a few more out that probably should not have been out,
Yeah.
or at least granted.
Right.
But I will say this to your point is we are working very, very closely with our teachers this year. We want to provide the very best. I've been in Bryant, I've been in Mountain Home, I've been in large districts where I've looked and said, wow, these districts that have great testing scores and great programs are in small districts. I'd love to be in a small district and do that. Here I am.
Yeah, that's right. There you are. Dr. Hill?
I just want to make sure from the parent, she said that her daughter played softball and was not softball, and she's been encouraged to play baseball. Did I get that right?
I wasn't, the problematic things that were brought up concerning IEPs and things, I visited with the principal. I'm not aware of these concerns. I'm not aware of her being asked to play baseball. Our Coach Guyton is our baseball coach, and I'm not aware of that invitation.
Okay. Because I meant to ask that too. So you
Ms.
do-
Dean?
Thank you.
No problem.
Madam Chair. So you do actually have softball?
Yes, I think maybe she's looking at Pee Wee. I'm not sure. That might be something we want to ask her.
Any other questions before the superintendent sits down? Okay, and you had a question for the parent?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you'll come back to the podium, please.
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted clarification on the extracurricular activities that you said that were not there, and did I understand you right to say that your daughter played softball, didn't have softball, was told to play baseball? Did I hear that correct?
Yes.
Okay, explain that to me.
Okay, so he was referring to Coach Guyton being softball. High school does have softball, the lower grades do not. So whenever it comes to school basketball, there was not a 3rd grade team last year, so she had to play up on a 4th grade team. There was only 1 4th grader. So all year the girls scored 4 points at every game combined. So they're not getting the foundation skills because we don't have the children to create one team for a grade. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly. And so the same with softball. So they're just trying to combine and put girls and boys on one team to create teams. Well, that's
for the younger ages.
correct.
Okay.
Yes, I don't have any in high school. My oldest is going into 4th, and so it would be that. I would like to say about Dr. Fisher mentioned me talking about pulling my girls. Whenever I met with the secretary, it's a small town. I know them all by name. I know all their families. So we were in casual talk, and she said, well, we've hit our max. We hit our max on March 13th. I said, oh, my land. So if we hit our max on March 13th, I may not get, accepted. I said, if not, I said, I guess maybe we will stay at Guy School if we won't get accepted. And that was before I knew that there was a such thing as an appeal and, things like this. And so that was the conversation with that. When Dr. Fisher came to meet with the teachers, I am very impressed by Dr. Fisher. I said that from the beginning. I really feel like if the school is going to turn around, I think that he could probably do it. But my husband and I's issue is that we've gone through 4 superintendents since I've been there in 5 years. I don't know that it's not really fair for my girls to be the guinea pigs on thinking, okay, it's going to change this year. Okay, it's going to change this year. And we've not had change in academics or sports or any of this in this many years. And so, do I hold out one more year? I can't do that. And so I feel like it's in my family's best interest to plant somewhere that my children can stay. And that's what we want. We want a community that's supportive, and we want to support that. And we're just not getting that where we are.
I don't know if those of you who are on the board are familiar with that part of the state, but
That's what I was just.
Rosebud and Quitman and Guy Perkins, those are all right there. It's sort of like you think Northwest Arkansas, but you really think Fayetteville, Rogers, but it's the same kind of thing. It's just a much more rural area in mine and Sarah's congressional district.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Newton? I'll come back to you if you're not ready. Dr. Hill?
No.
Ms. Dean? Ms. McFedridge? Mr. Williamson? Dr. Moore? Ms. McAdoo?
I don't have a question, but I do know that this has to be an extremely difficult position for you to be in.
It is. My husband's out of town working today, and he said, I wish so bad that I could be there. And I told him the hardest part is going to be going against the district that I work for, because it is a good district, but we just don't have what I feel like my girls need. And it's hard to come here and be a teacher and a parent and not know how to be polite and how to be, where I need to be in this situation.
Well, you've done a good job of balancing the two, and I
Well-
appreciate when you had the question that you preferred to speak here as a parent, not as the teacher.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? Any more questions for the superintendent? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the transfer.
Motion by Mr. Peckron to approve the transfer. Do I have a second? Second by Dr. Moore. All in favor, roll call. Okay, may we have discussion, please?
I'm a little bit torn that sports at a very, very young age plays a issue in transferring a child. That really troubles me. And I know you're not speaking as a teacher, but it just I'm really struggling with this one on being able to you're saying this is a good district and they're working, and so I'm struggling with this one. So I'll just leave it there.
Other discussion?
I'm really struggling with this case as well. My heart really goes to you. We've had a chance to visit with your new superintendent several times now. I think he's going to do a great job. I really do. And I would really like to see you try it for another year. I really do.
Other comments? Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve the transfer. Roll call.
Mr. Peckron,
Yeah.
Dr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
No.
Ms. McFetrich,
No.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Ms. Newton,
No.
Ms. Dean,
No.
3 yeas, 4 noes.
Motion fails.
Thank you.
Do we need to do another motion, or is that, because his motion was to approve, does that automatically make it not? Okay,
I believe in that case,
okay,
that is the only motion and action the board needs to take.
okay, thank you.
Okay. We're going to take a break in about 10 minutes. It's now 4 minutes till, so we'll come back at 5 minutes after. That's 9 minutes, I recognize. Our next item on the agenda is F, the Howard family. Ms. Dedman, oh, sorry, no? No, E was Guy Perkins Quitman, F is Howard. Do I have the names? Oh, that's right, I'm sorry, I forgot to make an X there. Takes a whole bunch of us to get me straight. Okay, H. Ms. Dedman, or I'm sorry if we rushed you.
No, ma'am, we
The
have
Fight. Is it Fight?
it's Fight.
Fight, the Fight family, Malvern to Bismarck request.
Yes, we do. We have the Fight family. They reside in Malvern. They've requested a transfer to Bismarck. We have a couple of Malvern cases in a row. The issue in each of them is that we've reached the 3% cap at Malvern, and that was the reason for the denial. The Bismarck School District, it is my understanding, would have accepted the Fight family.
Okay.
All right. All witnesses need to be sworn, and then I'll contact the Fight family.
Okay, with those of you who will be giving testimony in this instance, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You may be seated. Thank you.
Ms. Zook, I just realized that one of the defendants is a former student of mine, so I need to ask legal if I need to recuse.
If you don't think you can be impartial, then you would need to recuse.
Oh, what?
Ms. Zook is right. It's a decision for you to make as to whether you can be impartial in this matter. You may recuse yourself if you feel that that's not the case.
It's probably better if I, just for the appearance, I think it would be better if I
Okay,
don't.
it's my understanding if you abstain, you can stay in here. If you recuse, you leave the room. Is that correct? Okay, we're not gonna make you leave the room.
Okay. I'll sit here and be real quiet.
Remind me not to ask you any questions. Okay, if the parents, okay, do you want to present first? Okay. If you will identify yourself, please.
I'm Lori Fott. I'm mother of Madison Fott. We've had her in Bismarck School District her whole life. She's going into 3rd grade. A lot of that, we wasn't 100% sure where that boundary line was, and looking at the maps, it is obviously close to our property line. However, she knows her teachers at Bismarck. She knows her friends, family. But on the other hand, my father is also a help to us getting her off the bus. He's a quadriplegic. He cannot leave his home for lengthy periods of time. His wife is his sole caregiver, and she can't leave him for very long at a time to go 3 or 4 miles down the road to get her off of the bus. So they're a big help to us and a big help to them as well to have her there. And then, you know, we've lived in our location for 4 years. We've never seen the Malvern bus come by our home. Bismarck bus does. So they pick her up of a morning, and then she'll get off the bus at my parents' house as we both work 8 to 5 jobs. Normally I'm home by 5 or 5:30, but my husband works in construction, and we don't always know for sure when he's going to be able to come home. And like I said, we've had her in Bismarck since she started school, and then we've got a younger son that'll be starting kindergarten next year that we're going to have to probably do the same thing with.
Okay, and you've been attending on school choice in the past, or just confusion about the line?
Mostly just confusion about the line.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for, yes,
Yeah,
Dr. Moore?
so was did it come to your attention just this year about
Yes.
the line?
Yes. It was brought to our attention. The school principal called me one afternoon and told me, you know, she said, you realize you live in the Malvern School District and you need to go ahead and fill out the school choice application. So we did.
That's difficult. Are there other, is it a rural area, or are there other
It is a
families?
rural area, and there are several families that live in that general vicinity.
Okay, and you're,
That have all, I think, got the same problem.
okay, and you're not, so she's been at Bismarck her whole
Yes.
tenure? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Williamson?
No
Ms.
question.
McFadridge?
And I want to make sure I understand, the Bismarck school bus drives by your house,
Yes.
but the Malvern bus does not?
No. Malvern bus, the last I was told, is turning around about a half a mile to a mile down the road. I don't know if it's because they haven't had the children go into their school or what. But it's kind of a gray area there, I think, with the school districts.
Ms. Dean? Dr. Hill? Ms. McAdoo? Is there any questions, other discussion before she sits down? Okay, thank you.
We have representatives here from both districts. Jace Roberts is going to speak first for Malvern, the resident district.
Okay, resident district, and identify yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Jace Roberts, Chief of Staff for the Malvern School District. This is a 3% issue for us. I know we've got a couple more up here. Just to save you a couple questions probably that you have in your mind, this is a net transfer. We had our initial cap was 58. We had 4 choice in, which got us up to 62. As you see, we had a couple resolved earlier that involved us. That was with families when we had heard from a student that no longer wished to transfer. We went to the next in the line. That's why the 2 that were on your agenda are no longer on your agenda. And I can answer any questions about our 3% that you'd like me to.
It's 3% net, not overcapacity within a class?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Hill? Ms. Dean? Ms. McFettridge?
Yes, maybe can you address the school bus situation?
Yeah, I don't know that that would be an issue from, I mean, I can't speak for our transportation director. I don't do much for transportation, but my guess is in terms of school bus going there, when we're talking about school lines, we're going to go pick up where we have families. So if we don't, and this is a rural area, so if we don't have a family right there, we're not necessarily going to run a bus a mile further out than where we were if we didn't have anybody to pick up, if that makes sense.
Sure, so you feel like you would look at that? If
I don't believe
she
that would
was
be an
in-
issue.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Williamson? Dr. Moore? Ms. McAdoo? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay, I apologize, Mr. Packer. I keep forgetting that you're there, so thank you for speaking up.
Okay. Sir, could you touch on the reasons why you believe that the Malvern School District was at the 3% cap this year?
You know, I could give it my best guess. There's a couple different issues. One, we're in an interesting situation in that we have 6 school districts within a stone's throw of each other. There's also a good bit of poverty in our area, which leads to a lot of jumping around from school to school. I can tell you, even in my situation, from doing the school choice paperwork each year, we see students who choice from year to year. So there are some repeat choicers. That's a question we ask ourselves. We have almost brand new facilities across the board. We're in the middle of a complete high school renovation at this point. We were just awarded a RISE training award from the ADE specifically for our efforts with RISE and K through 2. We think we're doing, as good a job as we can. And, that's a question you ask yourself on a daily basis. Obviously, you're somewhat limited in what you can ask parents as they leave.
Thank you.
What about your dyslexia screening and service? Got some data about that, and you want to brag about that?
Yeah, it was good as well. I'm probably not the best person to talk on that, but we've made great efforts with that to move stuff around and make sure that we have enough staffing to do as good a job as we can on that.
Anything else? Okay, does the
I'm sorry, I have one more question.
Mr. Pecker?
So I just want to confirm my understanding. The students at issue in this appeal have never been in the Malvern District?
Correct.
Thank you.
Well, let me rephrase that. That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Commissioner?
Just something that was mentioned that, for point of clarification, the boundary issue in this area, is that, talk about that. I mean, is there anything being done between the 2 districts? And as you said, with so many districts within a close radius, how are these boundary issues being, what's the conversation around those?
What we suggest is for the parents to call us immediately. And I'll tell you the biggest issue we actually have is out in Diamond Head community. I don't know if you guys are familiar, there's actually 3 school districts in one neighborhood community, which can become an issue from time to time, and that gets even more complicated in terms of school choice because Lakeside is one of those school districts. So what we suggest is to call us. We have a great assessor's website that you can look up any address very quickly and easily on. We're very lucky in that regard. I know there's some counties that don't have that, and again, we're helpful with that in any way we can.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, the non-resident district? If you will, identify yourself.
Good morning. I'm Susan Kazire. I'm the superintendent at Bismarck School District. Just kind of to address too with the boundaries and the buses, the area actually where both families that we have here today, one side of the road is the Malvern District and the other side is the Bismarck School District. We have that with Lakeside, Lake Hamilton, so it's not uncommon for a lot of our buses that, you know, you'll be driving down the road and you'll see 2 or 3 school buses from the different districts because we are so rural. So we're, you know, passing each other quite a bit. Also being so rural, a lot of the roads are narrow 2 lanes, so a school bus may have to pass a little bit into another district to find a safe location to turn the bus around. So that's also something with that. I don't know the Fight family well. I've just got to spend a little bit of time with them, but I know that their little girl is a great little girl, and she's worked hard, and she's, you know, making advancements in school, and we'd love to keep her. Of course, we respect the law and always want to follow the law. But we also know that she has been there for a few years, and we would never want to do anything to upset that educational process for her. So,
questions? What is your total enrollment?
we have about 989 students.
Okay. As I was looking at your dyslexia numbers, what we would expect and what you have is, it doesn't G-hop. And so, can you address that?
Well, I can tell you that we have a very successful school district. Bismarck School District is, but we also do have a higher number than average with our SPED population and our students that we work with our dyslexia program. We use the Sunday program with our students, and I do feel like that's been very successful with our students, but we do have a higher than average population with that. Same thing, like I said, just overall with our general SPED population. So
thank you. Wanted to give you a chance to brag on yourself a little. Any other questions? Do the board members have questions of any of those who presented information? We ready with a motion? Ms. Dean?
I move to approve the transfer.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Dean, second by Mr. Williamson to approve the transfer. All in favor, roll call. Does anybody want more discussion? Sorry.
Mr. Peckron.
Yeah.
Dr. Hill.
Yes.
Mr. Williamson.
Yes.
Ms. Chambers. Sorry. Ms. McFetridge.
Yes.
Dr. Moore.
Yes.
Ms. Dean.
Yes.
We have 6 yeas and 1 recusal.
Okay, motion passes. Your children will be at the Bismarck School next year. Thank you for coming. Next, we have Pence family. This is also a Malvern to Bismarck. They're standing. Do you want me to go ahead and swear them in before you
Absolutely.
give the information? Thank you. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Thank you.
As you said, it's the Pence family lives in Malvern School District. They reside in Malvern School District. And they were requesting a transfer to Bismarck School District. Just as you saw with the last case, there was a misunderstanding as to which district the family resides in. You'll hear from the family on that count.
Parent, Mr. Pence, if you will, identify yourself.
I'm Toby Pence, Preston and Abby Pence's father, and my case is a lot like the fights. We're actually neighbors. We live less than a quarter mile apart, but it's the same community, same area, same part of the community, right on the school, on the border. So it's been a gray area, and back in February, it's brought to my attention I needed to sign papers and received a denial in June from the Malvern district, and that's why we're here. My daughter's going into the 8th grade, and my son's going into the 4th or 5th grade, and they've been there their whole life, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The resident district? Anything else?
Be glad to answer any questions you guys have.
Okay, did anyone have questions of the parent? I apologize, Mr. Pence. No.
Not the parent.
Okay.
Okay. My question is, the appeal I saw was the application was stamped on February 11th that you received it. When did you reach your 3% cap?
I can't tell you exactly because, like I said, it's been a floating number because we've added a few in the past few days, but I want to say it was January 16th.
Okay.
And again, the big issue with that is from the denial, I believe we had 33 last year that received priority and 15 siblings. So that got us up to, not real good for math, but 48. 48 out of 62, it left 14 spots.
Okay, then I have a question for Ms. Dedman about that. So when they do their net 3%, you count all the children in the family or just count the family as one?
Are we talking about, for purposes of the numerator, siblings are counted as one? So when you're making that percentage,
right,
siblings are counted as one for purposes of the numerator. Now you remember that's a fixed number that we established as of October 15th of the preceding school year. So that's what they're looking for.
Okay. Because I thought I understood you to say that with all the siblings and everybody that you went over your number.
Let me clarify. The siblings are one for purposes of a transfer in the numerator. Does that make sense to you as far as
Yes,
that?
this is
Okay.
the going out, right?
68 students, or 62 students, I'm sorry.
Okay, so it may be 100 kids if you're counting the family as one, because this is the requesting out.
That is the number.
That's the student number.
Yes.
That you're trying to.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything else you wanted to add from the Bismarck District?
Just before you vote on this, I do want to say, again, same thing, they're in the same area, and with Mr. Pence, literally part of his front yard is Bismarck School District, so I think he might be willing to have his house move forward if he needs to. We're not paying for that.
Is it a movable house?
Just real quickly, I just want to tell you just a little bit about Abby and Preston. Abby is in band, GT, pre-AP, art club, junior beta, and junior honor society, and Preston is top in his class for his artistic ability and is on level and above academically. And Mr. Pence is very active. He's a very active and involved parent in the school district. He actually went to Bismarck School District, and he lives in the same house that he grew up in. So that too, being on the line is part of the understanding that, you know, he went to Bismarck and thought, well, that's where my kids will go to school. So just kind of wanted to share with you.
Mr. Secretary?
Yeah. Okay, so these kids have been in Bismarck since they started kindergarten. At what point did somebody realize that that there was a problem with the boundaries, and who notified whom? And I mean, can you talk through that a little bit?
Someone else actually moved in close, a neighbor moved in close to where Mr. Pence is, and then they came to enroll. And so whenever we went in to check to see where they were, you know, district-wise, and then the elementary principal said, oh, well, you're actually in the Malvern district. And I said, well, no, that can't be possible because my neighbor, their kids go to Bismarck School. Well, no, it's Malvern School. And so that's whenever, and then she notified Mr. Pence and said, you know.
And so this website Mr. Roberts mentioned in the last case probably didn't exist, or at least wasn't as robust in
exactly
8 years ago.
Yeah, but
I'm
that's
guessing,
what we use now to, for the last few years.
Thank you. That
exactly.
helps clarify in my mind.
Yeah, and it's great, very helpful.
Okay.
Is there not such thing as a grandfather clause?
I'll let you ask legal.
Once you find out.
I would just say, seriously though, Dr. Hill, I would say that is why the law has the appeal process, so that it is brought to this body for consideration of the extenuating circumstances. Because I know we've dealt with boundary issues. I don't know that we've dealt with boundary issues where the realization happened for a substantial group of people at one period of time, like what we seem to have here. But I won't say grandfather clause because that has very specific legal connotations. But that is why there is this process that's available to parents.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. Peckron, did you have more questions?
No, thank you.
Ms. Newton?
I guess I still wasn't real clear on the net part, if he was using the families or the students when he answered the question. I wasn't real clear on that, but other than that, that was my only question.
I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
When she described the process as using the families as one, is that what you were doing?
Siblings count for each one, yes.
So, I mean, you checked and make sure.
And I believe this law actually changed in the special session last year.
We don't verify.
Would you?
I'm sorry. Beg your pardon. We don't verify. What happens is the district uses the number that we established as of October 15th, and they do the calculations themselves. But as far as are they using the net, Malvern gave testimony earlier that it was net and that they did continue to accept families as their net number changed.
Okay.
I think the question that Ms. Newton and I have is the net number of kids or number of families, since they are the district from which they are moving?
I'm going to go ahead and direct you to, you've got in the back of your packet there, you've got the statute, and I'll show you what it is that we're looking at here. We're going to turn to, it's 6/18/1906, so it's the one titled Limitations. I'm looking on probably the second page for y'all.
Okay, wait till we get there.
Mm-hmm.
Say the number again, please.
6/18/1906. The title of the statute is Limitations.
And is it A, 2, 3? Which
So
one?
you're going to go to B1B. It's probably on the second page. It's this far from the bottom. What the statute says is, for purpose of determining the percentage of school choice transfers under this section, siblings who are counted in the numerator as transfer students shall count as one student. So when we say that siblings are counting as one student, what we mean is when we're coming up with that 3%, siblings who are counted in the numerator as transfer, they're one student. So if you've got brothers and sisters in a household that are transferring, they're one.
Okay. And do you know from Malvern if that's the way you calculated to get to your 3%?
I would have to go back to look at our numbers on that. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay. I guess I'll ask the board if you're ready for a motion, or do you want to table this while he checks? Okay, I see no indication that anybody wants to table. Do you have any more questions for any of the parties? Seeing none, roll call. I do have a motion.
Motion to approve transfer.
Dr. Moore moved that approve the transfer. Do we have a second? Mr. Williamson, second. Roll call.
Mr. Peckron?
Yes.
Dr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. McFetridge?
Yes.
Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Dean?
Yes.
7 yeas, 0
Motion
nays.
passed. Your request is granted. Thank you for your involvement as a stakeholder, as a parent, and I'm pleased to hear how well your students are doing. Okay, next is the Norwood family. Ms. Dedman?
The Norwood family also resides in the Malvern School District. They requested a transfer to Glen Rose School District. They were denied based on Malvern having met its 3% net maximum limit. And Ms. Norwood is here today.
Would anybody expecting to give testimony please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay. You may be seated.
Ms. Hood, could he text somebody and get them to check on the sibling number while we're waiting?
Is there
While he-
someone there that could access that information for you?
Probably not, because it's on my computer and I have the password.
Okay. Can you access your computer from a distance, or do you
I
have to?
cannot.
Oh, okay, well, I understand.
I believe we calculate it as a student, not a family, but I would have to double check that.
Okay. Ms. Dedman?
Mr. Roberts pointed out to me an update in the law. I'll return you to that same section, but in your packet you will not be able to see it. If the application for transfer that causes the school district to meet or exceed the 3% numerical net maximum limit is on behalf of a sibling group, then the district will allow all siblings in the sibling group to exercise school choice under this chapter. That is to say, if I am sending 3 students and my first student makes the cut and my students are related, those further 2 students are also to go along with the first student because they would cause the student sibling group to be broken. So it says here that if the application for transfer that causes them to meet or exceed that 3% limit is on behalf of a sibling group, then the sibling group will exercise school choice under the subchapter.
And that's still the
That is-
transfer out, but not the transfer in?
That's still the transfer out, absolutely. And it's still under that same section about the numerical maximum limit in the same place. It is an update to the law.
Mr. Secretary?
Just, yes, I mean, and the reason that we probably don't remember it is because it did happen in a fiscal or special session, not in a general session. But in recalling the conversation there, Senator Clark brought that issue up because he felt like there was, the 3% was no longer 3%, the way it was being calculated before. But in order to protect situations where, if anything, any requests that had multiple family members put a district over that 3%, that individual request, like the last one that came, and if there was more than one student, then there was consideration to be given. But we did eliminate that whole numerator and denominator section that was creating so much confusion. So now it is student counts.
Outside, I want to apologize. I think I was misunderstanding your question, Ms. Newton, when you were asking family or individuals, because I knew the law had changed, and that kind of threw me off with your question.
And this is still transfers out, not transfers in. The 3%, the only limit on transfers in is if you have, quote, over the number within a class, not. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Capacity issues, but as far as school choice out, it's the net, but it's the 3% of all students, not
all families.
Families, right.
Is everyone clear on that? Or at least today? Okay, sorry for all the discussion. Family, no, well.
I thought the law had changed, and then when you were saying families, I thought, wait a second, we're talking about students.
Yeah.
Kind of, one step, I thought I could go pull my computer,
Right.
but I'm not, off the top of my head, I'm not that good.
So you know now not to be nervous in front of us. We're all working on this together. The Norwood family? Thank you for your patience while we got some clarification, and if you will, identify yourself, anyone who's going to speak, and then start your presentation.
My name is Hannah Norwood. This is my mom. Her name is Tracy Dyer. I'm here for Lily, who is 5 years old, and she'll start kindergarten this year. Elijah, who is 11 years old, and he will go into the 6th grade this year. And Hayden, who is 12, and she will start 7th grade this year. It has always been my intentions for my kids to go to Glen Rose because me, my husband, and all of our family attended Glen Rose. The only reason we live where we do now is because there was a medical reason for my sister who is disabled. This past year and a half ago, she got really, really sick with meningitis. So we had to move away from any kind of livestock out of the country, basically. So we had to move quickly to put her in a safe environment, and the house we live in is the first house we found that we could afford and would be safe for her. Last year, Hayden started 6th grade at Malvern, and Elijah started 5th grade at Glen Rose. When we got guardianship of both of them, we was going to have Hayden transferred to Glen Rose. But Malvern, they couldn't release her because it was past the time of school choice. And they could pull Eli out of Glen Rose because he wasn't school choiced, because he had lived in Glen Rose School District while the school year started. So we finished the school year out last year through with K-12 with Arkansas Virtual Academy at home. Elijah has went to Glen Rose since kindergarten, except for this past year while he was homeschooled. He's always done very well academically. He's on an 8th grade reading level in 5th grade. He looks really forward to going back to Glen Rose to see his teachers and his friends, and he's excited to be able to play sports this year. Lily is very excited to start kindergarten. She wants to go to school. She wants to get a backpack. She wants to do the whole thing. She's really excited about it. At Glen Rose, she'll be able to attend kindergarten with her family and her friends that will be attending kindergarten this year too. So she'll be familiar with people. Hayden is happy about the possibility to go to Glen Rose. She has went to Malvern previously. She's also been in a school in Alabama when she was with her parents. When she was in Glen Rose, she wasn't happy about school. She really didn't care. She was depressed, and we've been working on that since we have guardianship of her now. And she's really excited to get involved and have a new fresh start where she gets to make new friends and she doesn't have people that have seen the things that she was living in the past. I did try to do things the correct way. I believe it was in February when I turned in school choice forms for the kids. I did get accepted from Glen Rose for all of them, and then I received a letter being denied from Malvern. So I would prefer that my kids go to Glen Rose. I went there, my husband went there, our families went there. My sister, who is disabled, she went there even though she can't talk or walk. They got a teacher who was there for her, and they let her go to school. My mom worked at the cafeteria at the time. They let Haley go to school until she was 22, and she got to graduate with that year, and I have a lot of respect for them for that. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is anyone from the Glen Rose district here? Yes. Do any of you have questions for the parents before they sit down? Okay. Do you have anything you want to add, Mr. Glen Rose? I know, I was giving him a hard time. If you'll identify yourself.
My name is Tim Holliker. I'm superintendent of schools at Glen Rose. And I, of course, knew Ms. Tracy and Ms. Hannah. And as far as that goes, they have worked and attended Glen Rose. I'm not as familiar with the children as this is. I am very aware of the disability that she spoke of, and we have plenty of room, and we'd love to have them.
Okay, I commend you for that. Okay, questions by the board? Mr. Pekron, I'll start with you.
No questions.
Ms. Newton? Dr. Hill? Ms. Dean? Ms. McFettridge? Mr. Williamson? Dr. Moore? Ms. McAdoo? Do you have any more discussion, or is someone ready for a motion?
I move to approve the transfer.
Motion by Ms. Dean to approve the transfer, second? Second by Ms.
Second.
McFettridge. Roll call?
Mr. Peckron,
Yes.
Dr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. McFettridge,
Yes.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Ms. Newton,
Yes.
Ms. Dean.
Yes.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passed. You got your transfer. And thank you for adopting. I appreciate that.
Our next family, we have a member joining us by phone. Would it be possible to take a short break to
Sure.
get her on the phone? Okay.
We're always up for a break.
Thank you.
Let's come back in, like, say, 7 minutes. Will that give you enough time, Ms. Donovan? Okay.
use the mic to speak. Ms. Luker, are you with us?
Ms. Donovan, are we ready? Okay. I will remind the board that in addition to the link on the agenda, there was an email with additional information from the attorneys sent to you in an email from Ms. Dedman.
Has anyone been unable to access that information through the email, through the secure file share?
You can-
Secure file share. There it is. Is that it? Okay, great.
Kathy, can you access your email on your phone, or you don't do it on your phone? Okay. Okay. Don't look at me. Miss Wendell can help you. That's why I just have one of them. We're still waiting on Miss Luker to be reached by phone, so be patient with us. July 23rd. If you'll give me yours, I can forward it to you. I can forward it to him and you can read his screen, maybe. It's the best I can do. I don't know any way to get it on to okay. Just to your .gov. I will give you your email that you can access on your phone, and I'll send it to that email. Okay. Did you get it? Because it's protected by. Did you say Kathy? Did you not get it?
No.
It was a Kathy with a K, right?
Yeah, but if my servers,
Okay,
server at my office
can
is
she access with her password online?
Well, the district has 148 pages, 77 pages, and it only has 148 pages.
Deborah Luker.
Miss Luker, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Luker, welcome to our meeting. We're dealing with a couple of technical things at the moment, so if you'll just bear with us and stay on the phone, we'll be with you shortly.
Okay. Yes, I was having technical difficulty to get through.
And you may want to, something that sometimes works really well for those on the phone, when you're listening, if you'll put us on mute so background noise doesn't interfere with your ability to hear. And then when you're wanting to speak or present or answer questions, if you will then take it off mute, we can hear you then.
But what it did, it wasn't pushing in on my code. It wouldn't push 7878 twice.
Okay.
78.
I get it. Thank you. He's working on it. Okay, Ms. Luker, Mr. Pecron?
ma'am.
Okay, everybody ready? All right, Ms. Dedman?
Okay, you have
Yes.
your final hearing today is the Luker family. They've requested a public school choice appeal to transfer from Forest City School District to Wynn School District. The Luker family resides in the Forest City School District. The Luker
Yes,
family
ma'am.
so Ms. Luker is on the phone, as you can hear. She is represented by Disability Rights Arkansas, Ms. Reagan Stanford. Wynn School District is represented by Ms. Sharon Street, and Mr. Brad Beavers is here on behalf of Forest City School District. All of the testifying parties, not the attorneys, will need to be sworn.
Okay, with those who will be giving testimony, including you, Ms. Luker, would you stand and raise your right hand?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be
Yes, ma'am, I
seated.
do.
Okay. In this instance, Ms. Dedman, does it the same procedure where the parent goes first? Okay, or the representative of the parent? Okay, if you will identify yourself.
I'm Reagan Stanford. I'm with Disability Rights Arkansas, and we're representing the Luker family in this appeal. Carson Luker is a 9-year-old little boy that will be entering the 2nd grade this fall. He has been homeschooled for the past year and was previously enrolled in the Forest City School District. He applied for a school choice transfer to the Wynn School District for the 2018-2019 school year, and again for the 2019-2020 school year, which we're discussing today. He was rejected both times, with them saying that they would need to hire additional staff to accommodate this student without further explanation prior to the appeal. He has siblings that have been accepted through the school choice transfer that are currently attending Wynn schools. Carson Luker is being impermissibly denied admission to the Wynn School District based on his disability. While districts are indeed not required to hire additional staff to accommodate students applying to their district through school choice, districts are also not permitted to reject students with disabilities on the mere speculation that additional staff may be required, which they have done here. Wynn's assertion that Carson would require an aide is not supported by his previous IEPs, prior observations, any prior recommendations. Allowing districts to rely solely on speculation, sight unseen without evaluating a child, to reject students with disabilities is permitting discrimination based on disability in its clearest form. Wynn asserts that since Carson is not coming from an Arkansas public school with the current IEP, the district must consider all possible placement options. By this logic, because any child with a disability could at any time require additional supports, they could reject any child with a disability. While acknowledging that they cannot do so, the district has attempted to unilaterally modify his educational placement. They're relying on their determination based solely on their review of records from Forest City that Carson would need a one-on-one instruction most, if not all, of the day, which he has never received and, like I said, has never been recommended. The district admits records provided by Forest City do not state that additional staff will be needed to accommodate the student, and that no additional staff have been requested in the school choice application. Wynn claims that their process for the LEA supervisor to determine whether additional staff will be required is given the student's placement on his IEP in the resident district. However, like we said, the latest IEP that the student has did not recommend additional staff be required to handle this student. Accommodations and supports for personnel included only social reinforcer to structured learning environment, and he was pulled out for resource classes for 300 minutes a week. Due to Carson being homeschooled since February 2018, Wynn appears to assert his IEP is not instructive, and they must assume that he will need the highest possible level of supports needed to succeed. This argument, while faulty as applied to the 2019-2020 application, does nothing to explain the rejection from the 2018-2019 application, when there was still a current IEP in place that did not call for the addition of staff or any kind of one-on-one for this particular student. Recommendations that have been made for this student include a smaller setting or a resource class in the afternoon, following a consistent schedule, instituting personal visual schedule, instituting a reward system, all things that would not require the addition of a one-on-one aide or additional staff to accommodate him. Additionally, it's unclear what, if any, of these were actually implemented in the Forest City School District. This child was, it appears to be neglected in his educational environment in that district. So it's hard to base how he could succeed based on the supports, because I don't think even the IEP, once it was put in place, was fully implemented. So we don't know if he could succeed based on, you know, just what was already in that IEP as proposed. And while we maintain that they cannot unilaterally modify his IEP, the modifications they've proposed are not carefully considered as they state. Ms. Luker went and filed the school choice application on May 1st at the school district, and she was rejected on May 13th, 2019. By their admission, they had returned the records to the student's mother and had to re-request them from Forest City when she applied on May 1st. So during that last month, very busy time of the school year, they very quickly, with only 7 business days, carefully considered, reviewed hundreds of pages of records, and unilaterally made a new decision that this child would need a one-on-one aid all day in order to succeed in school. The application, also the application that she submitted was handwritten. She filled it out at the school. The school then apparently entered that into their online system, and we received, when we did a FOIA request for all of the applications to kind of see what patterns of accepting they had done.
That's not a problem.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, that is a problem.
That is a problem.
That's the 5 minutes, so you will have another opportunity. Okay. You'll get 20 to present your case.
Okay.
I have a question before you sit down. Were the requests for records signed, that they had permission to look at these records? The Wynn District records from the Forest City District?
That I don't. I believe that it's implicit in their applying, you know, in their doing the school choice application. We haven't looked into that, but we know they did request them, the records from Forest City, and review them.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dedmon, do you know if that's implicit in the application?
It's not implicit to my knowledge. It's certainly not explicit on the application. Usually when you're requesting records, because of the interplay of FERPA, you would normally either find a FERPA exception that applies, and I'm not sure what exception the district might have used in their analysis, or you would get the prior written consent of the parent.
Thank you. Sure, Dr. Moore?
It might be appropriate to ask later, but I'll go ahead and ask now. On the application to transfer, it asks if the applicant requires special needs or programs. Why is that there?
It is part of the, so the application itself is currently promulgated as part of the rules, and I suppose it's there to help the district consider the lack of capacity of a program grade building classroom.
Okay. But it doesn't, does it ask for more information if a parent clicks yes?
The district might be doing that by phone, but the application itself does not ask for further information.
Okay.
I think it would probably be if the child was going to need to be in a self-contained as opposed to resource setting.
Right.
That may be, but there is nothing on the application that says what kind of special ed or special needs that the child might have.
Right, that seems like maybe something we could think about in the future changing.
Yeah, if it's not addressed in legislation, we may want to revisit that at some point.
Okay, thank you.
Let's let the non-resident district. Thank you for your patience and bearing with me. Please identify yourself.
Sharon Street here for the Wynn School District. And good morning. I'll try to be rapid here, but this is convoluted information to give in a short amount of time. Let me answer your FERPA question. It's an exception under FERPA when a child seeks to enroll in another school district. It is an exclusion that you don't have to get parental consent if they're seeking enrollment, that you can transfer records between 2 school districts where a child is trying to move from one school district to another school district. The first year, Forest City wasn't rapid about getting the district the records, and the parent provided the records, but the second year, Forest City popped them out real quick, so it wasn't a problem. The problem that I see here is, number one, when you get students from another school district, you do look at your capacity issues that you all have discussed at some length this morning. But when it's a special education student, you do look at placement. Ordinarily, if a student is coming from another school district, you're going to implement the placement option that was on that child's IEP coming from that school district until you have the child for a little bit and figure out, do some reevaluation, figure out whether that's going to work or not. But you also get all the records so that you can very quickly see whether or not that is going to work. What you see with this student is last year when he applied, he had been in the Forest City School District, and I disagree with the parent. The Forest City School District brought in a consultant and spent 3 long visitations with that child to try to come up with some ways to deal with it. Before those things could be implemented, the child was withdrawn from the Forest City School District, and then he was homeschooled for the following school year. So when Wynn got the application this year, they looked back at everything that Forest City had, and then they also considered what had happened to the child since then, including the 5 residential placements that he's had for 2 to 3 to 7 days since he entered school. And what they see, and this is what I do for a living, so I know how to evaluate that, is that this child's problem is not an inherent innate ability to master tasks that are put before him. It's the ability to regulate his emotional state and his behavior. And if you look back in his history, which I provided in part of the exhibit, this is a child who was probably a meth baby. Not all meth babies have emotional dysregulation problems, but a high percentage of them do. Then he's also got some diagnoses like bipolar and some other psychological disorders. So his need for assistance in class, based on what they looked at, was the need for him to have one-on-one assistance in order to be successful. And that's what the records from Forest City demonstrated, that when he is working with a teacher or someone in a one-on-one setting, he can function, he can manage his behavior, and keep himself under control. When he is loose in a classroom with 20 kids or even with 5 or 6 kids, he loses that ability to hold himself together and manage his behavior. So what we were looking at in bringing him into the Wynn School District, we would probably need 2 things. We're probably going to need the services of a behavioral consultant, and we would look probably at a BCBA, and we're probably going to have to put an aide in every classroom he's in, either personal to him or personal to the classroom. I prefer to the classroom because I don't want an aide teaching him all the time. There are times when I want the aide working with the classroom and the individual teacher working with him. You get that better when you attach the aide to the classroom. But what we'd probably do is have one in the classrooms he's in, and one of those would follow him if he went, for example, from regular class to resource or resource to regular class. And we're thinking probably resource class or self-contained classroom going out to a regular class. But that is not a unilateral decision that we can make. That's a decision that will have to be made in an IEP team with the participation of the parent. So based on the fact that, it's real easy to set the law up this and say, well, it doesn't say you have to have one. But for the people that are actually implementing the programs for these children, they're trying to figure out what is it really going to take for us to serve this child and serve this child so that he gets a free, appropriate public education. And that's what they've decided it's going to take for this child. Can I reserve my time?
And that's the end of your 5 minutes, but you will have 20 more.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Edmond, do you need to present further?
We do have the resident district here also.
Okay.
Mr. Beavers for Forest City.
He was sitting way back. I didn't see you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Would you identify yourself?
I will. I'm Brad Beavers. I represent the Forest City School District. We are the resident district, and our position here is we have no dog in this fight, with the exception to say that we stand ready to educate any and all students who are in our district and to do whatever is necessary, as we were with this child up to February of 2018. Ms. Street was very kind to point out to you that at that point we had taken the necessary steps and were preparing to move forward with a plan for this particular child, in fact. So we stand ready to do what is necessary. On the other hand, I think I would be remiss if I did not note that we have faced a number of school choice applications since school choice went into effect from a number of districts in our area who have taken school choice children and a number of applications. And I think that one of the things that we have no empirical evidence, but we have a lot of anecdotal evidence that over that period of time, they have systematically rejected SPED choice applications. And I think that if you began to look at what they have done is anytime that they have needed to increase staffing to accept regular students, that has not been a problem. So they have systematically increased their capacity to accept regular students. But when it comes time for a need to increase capacity for SPED students, they reject those applications. And so I think one of the questions that might be asked today is how many SPED applications were accepted this year? How many SPED rejections were made? And then maybe over the period that choice has been in effect, how many SPED applications have been accepted? What was your capacity for SPED students when choice came into effect? And what is it now, as opposed to what your capacity for regular students was at that time and what it is now? I don't know that. I don't have the capacity, and nor does the Forest City School District have the desire to undertake studies to that effect, maybe the Department of Education. And I think that was a question from above that might have been being asked early on as to looking as to why a district might reach its 3% cap on choice out. But those are the type of things that we have. But as far as where we stand on this particular application, we'll educate any student in our district. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we go straight to the 20 minutes or do we do questions?
If you have questions based on what you've just heard, you may ask a question, but then we'll move on to the 20 minutes for each party to give their main argument.
Okay. Mr. Pekron, do you have questions on the presentations to this point?
Ma'am?
I'm sorry, there's two people on the phone. I don't know, did we lose Mr. Pekron in the process of picking up Ms. Luker?
Oh, I'm sorry, I had my phone on mute. No questions.
Okay. Ms. Newton? Okay. Dr. Hill? Ms. Dean? Ms. McFetridge? Mr. Williamson? Dr. Moore? Ms. McAdoo? All right. Then we will start with the parent's attorney, and you have 20 minutes.
Okay, I'd like to first respond.
Pull it up a little bit, yes, and re-identify yourself.
Oh, I'm Reagan Stanford. I'm with Disability Rights for representing the Luker family. Wanted to respond to a few things that from the Wynn School District. They did mention that he has been in 5 residential placements since being pulled out. Carson has had some residential placements, but the last one was in May of 2017. He was having, a lot of medication changes and things like that have been worked out, it appears, at this point. And also the consultant that came in, and I would hope that the board would look at that consultant when she went in and actually observed and made recommendations, unlike the recommendations that the Wynn School District has made for what he will need to perform well in the classroom. This woman was with him for 3 full days in the classroom and made recommendations, none of which required the addition of an aide or any kind of staff to support his behaviors. And those are included in the packet, that information. And those recommendations were made in April of 2017. He did not leave the Forest City School District until February of 2018. So he was left there in time to implement those recommendations from that observer. Also, just, when we were speaking about the high percentage of meth babies that have mood dysregulation, I understand that the other part, she's an attorney representing her client, not a child psychologist, and so some of, the information about the behaviors or what would be necessary to care for these kids in the classroom may have been overstated or misstated. And that. All right. Also, as far as the Forest City School District mentioning, we did FOIA all the applications and rejections for school choice for the past 2 years from the Wynn School District. I'm not sure that it was fully complied with, but we do know that they have represented to this committee via their response that they accepted all students with special needs who applied last school year. We know that to not be true because Carson applied last year and was rejected. So there was at least one child with special needs that was rejected last year. And then I did just want to look at how they're making this determination that they need these extra supports. Like I said, if you look through the documentation, there's no actual documentation that he would need the addition of staff in the classroom. And what we did see, as the mother wrote in the handwritten, and just like you said, there's only a box to check to say that yes, this child have special needs in the classroom. And so I would like to ask the Wynn School District, or hopefully you guys can, who then processed that and put it into the computer application. And in the computer, they added that under what type of special needs or programs does this applicant require, they put physical, speech, OT, self-contained classroom aid. There's nothing to substantiate any of those except for speech. He is receiving speech therapy. So I'm not sure who inputted that and if their analysis was based on that faulty information that was inputted into the system. Also, there's a handwritten note on that application that states, we are at capacity with current numbers, would require additional staff. But when it's maintained throughout this process, this is not a capacity argument. It's an argument that this individual student would require the addition of staff. So it is, I think, noteworthy that at some point this was a capacity argument that turned into this particular kid would need so much support, we couldn't support him in our school. Also, just to speak to his behavior, it appears that they relied on detailed behavioral descriptions, as they call them in their response, that were recorded by his teachers. But if you actually look at District's Exhibits 50 through 51, that is just an email that is describing one day on August 31st, 2016, and his behaviors on that one particular day, and then another email from his teacher saying what she has done in the classroom. Like I said, all of this was from August and September of 2016. His IEP wasn't even implemented until December of 2016. So at the time of those behaviors, with their basing this information that he may need one-on-one supports, he was not receiving any special services from the Forest City School District. His IEP had not been implemented. And then also we kind of alluded to, but the conclusions regarding the educational consultant's observations, that what success he experienced at school occurred when he was working one-on-one with an adult. Certainly, sure, when he was working one-on-one with an adult, he did better. I think most children would. But that does not mean that he was not capable of being in the classroom when he was not with a one-on-one adult. And like I said, I would ask that you please look at those observations, because she does make a lot of really good observations and kind of highlights the chaotic nature of his education at that time, when they were transitioning into kind of figuring out a set schedule for resource classes, and kind of even simple things like a visual timer, giving him a calendar and a behavioral contract, things like that, that hadn't been fully implemented yet. So it's a great leap to jump from implementing those recommendations that lady that observed him for 3 days made, to he would require one-on-one supports in the classroom. I think that's all that we have to do.
Anyone have any questions? Is that the end of your 20-minute part? I know it's not the end of your 20 minutes, but is it the end of your... Anybody have any questions for her before we hear from the non-resident district? Okay, thank you. Okay, Dr. Moore.
Okay.
How many siblings?
Am I allowed to speak?
Wait just a minute, and then we'll call on you.
How many siblings?
Two.
And are they already attending the Wynn School District?
Yeah, they've been attending for a couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, you do have time left, so if Ms. Luker has something she would like to add, then that would be fine. Ms. Luker, you can go ahead if you'll speak
Yes.
loudly and clearly.
Okay. The teacher that he had, Miss Lindsay, unfortunately, the man that she was going around trying to get him to write down bad stuff about Clarkson. Well, unfortunately, this man has passed away by now. He was a very young man, and he was awesome with Clarkson. And there is a teacher in Wynn, Mr. Baldwin, Mr. Williams is his name, and he was awesome with Clarkson. And when Miss Lindsay got where she couldn't handle Clarkson with him, she was sending with either the ISS, well, Mr. Murphy was the man that passed away, or Mr. Williams, his kindergarten teacher. And he was very mean to Clarkson. Now, when he was in the resource class, which was for, I think until about 11 o'clock for lunch, he did fine with the resource class teacher. Her name was Miss Banks. She was an awesome teacher. And he did very well with her. But when he went back to his regular classroom, he was, had to sit by she was called a granny lady. And I'm sorry, with the kids that's got problems like my child does. And yes, the court, I'm sorry, but my child does have math problems. But he didn't have the right medicine that he does now. He is a much better child. And yes, he has been sent away 4 or 5 times, and Forest City does know that. And Forest City, all they did was they didn't send just his records, they sent every vowel language that he has ever spoken of. But if they would have did that for every child that was in the school would be shut down by now. But my son is, he's a much better child than what he was. And when I talk about the Forest City, he has changed a lot. So, and he is ready to go to school, but he just doesn't want to go back to Forest City. That's where he had all this trouble at. And they wanted him, they had him already nailed as a trouble child. And, you know, he's a much better child now. And I do believe that if he could get him Wynn, which Wynn classes has the classes for a resource child like my son. And that was my battle, and that's my issues with Wynn. And that's why I believe Wynn could help my child if they would just give him a chance.
Okay, thank you.
And I've talked to my neighbors, and they told me, yes, they do have them. And Forest City does not. As assistant principal and the principal herself, the sharing counselor, and Miss Williams, they said, we just don't have them. But they finally made up a resource class for like 5 or 6 kids that needed a resource class. So when he was in there, he did okay. But when he had to go back to the classroom and supposed to sit there like an angel for the rest of the day by a teacher and do nothing but look at the walls of the chalkboard. No, yes, he did get very bored and out of control. I don't lie for my child. Yes, he got out of control.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for taking this child into your home. I guess one of the questions I have for you, Ms. Luker, are you aware that if your child under school choice attends a different district, that transportation would be the responsibility of the parent?
Yes, I already have my other children that I'm raising. My daughter is deceased. And so I have 6 grandkids, that I transport already. I don't transport them all, but next year I'll be doing the twins to go right along with him. But I already have 2 that's already in Wynn, and Carson will be 3 if I can get him in Wynn. And I plan on doing the twins in Wynn because Forest City is down to 0. They are not a good choice of school. And I don't want none of my kids never back in Forest City school. So yes, ma'am, I do. I take them to Colt every morning to the bus to go to Wynn School, and I'm there every afternoon to pick them up.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
That's my responsibility.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Yes.
I just want to clarify, I think when she was first talking, so one of the recommendations has been that he be placed with a male teacher, and there is some of the observations. So like she was saying, his kindergarten teacher, he only had 1 behavioral incident that was documented in kindergarten, was a male teacher. They put him in ISS frequently in Forest City. That was a male teacher that he had a good rapport with. So he does respond to, certain types of teachers, not a one-on-one necessarily, but to certain teachers, that did take an interest in him and and would give him that kind of support. So I think that's when she was kind of listing out some of his teachers at the beginning, that he has been able to build a rapport with some teachers, and not with others, like most kids.
He has to bond real well with male teachers.
Okay, thank you. Do any of
And his dad now is in the nursing home with Alzheimer's, and it's just me raising, my kids, my grandchildren, and him now, and he just responds to males. But that is one. She is right. That is one thing, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, Miss Reagan. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's perfectly fine. You're the best advocate for your child. That's absolutely fine.
Right. He does really respond to he does respond to male teachers.
Okay. Thank you.
If they're polite to, if they're good with him, then he's usually very polite with him, and they get more out of him.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do any of the other board members have any questions for the attorney or the mom before we go to the non-resident district? Okay?
No.
Okay, thank you. The non-resident.
Everything worked out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank y'all for taking the time out to work with my child.
Yes, and now we're going to hear from the Wynn District.
Okay, first of all, I want to respond to what what Brad said earlier about how districts treat kids with disabilities. And let me tell you, disability is kind of my area of interest in working with school districts. I work with about 50 school districts, and you don't get to work with me very long if you discriminate against kids with disabilities. And I can tell you that that's not true for either Wynn or Forest City, because I have worked with them some also. In asking them, when I first agreed to represent them on this, one of my first questions was, what do you do about, what do your applications look like? And here's what I was told. We don't turn anybody away unless we have to hire additional staff, whether they are regular ed or special ed. And then I had them run the numbers for me for the last few years so that I could verify that they're not turning anybody away based on the fact that they have a disability. It's strictly based on whether or not they're going to have to hire additional staff. Now then, the reason that hasn't been much of a problem for regular ed kids is they've been able to absorb everybody. For example, last year, 20 kids left the district, 40 kids came into the district under school choice. They were able to absorb all those kids, so they didn't have to hire additional staff for any regular ed kids. Only one kid last year, child, excuse me, I used that term, I probably should use child or student, was going to require an aide or additional staffing, and it was this child. So, and I didn't leave him as the exception in my brief. I apologize for that. This year, they took all of the special ed kids that didn't require additional staffing. So they're not discriminating based on disability. They're discriminating only on the basis of, are we going to have to hire additional staff? And that is true for regular ed kids just as it is true for special ed kids. Now then, I understand, first of all, let me defend Forest City here a little bit. Forest City does an adequate job, more than adequate job, with kids with disabilities, and the fact that they brought in a consultant to work with this kid is some evidence of that. Now then, I think that when you analyze the records, and that's why I tried to provide you as much records as I do, what you have to go through and glean, because we don't have much information about this kid. We have no information about him for at least a year, except that he has been homeschooled. And I'm going to presume in a homeschool situation that he has been at least on 1-to-1 or 1 to very small numbers of students if he's been homeschooled. So I've got a child that's coming from that setting back into public school. I know what his problems are looking back at this other data, and I can see where he has been successful. You know, he was not successful on his IEP in Forest City. And so I know that whatever they had in place at that time was not producing what they would have wanted it to produce. So in looking at this, I have to see what works. And when you go through the records and read the anecdotes from teachers and from the consultant, what you see works is when someone is working with him one-on-one. So if he were to come to our district, we would want him to be successful. And our obligation under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, requires us to provide him with a free appropriate public education. So we would have to see that he makes progress. We think the way to do that would be to put him in a situation where he has pretty much one-on-one instruction all day, and he has the services of a behavior consultant, which we could contract with for that service, and we would use a BCBA to come in and train the teachers in how to work with him. What we would hope to move to over a period of time is where he could work some without that one-on-one attention, but we don't in any way think that we're going to be able to start there. You always want to get kids to where they can work independently, but you work on it, and as it improves, you try to fade back some. So we're pretty confident about what this child is going to need, regardless of what setting he's in. If he's in the regular ed class, he's sure going to need an aide in there. If he goes out to a resource room, because of what we know is in the resource room now, what we already know, the kids who are there, we know we're going to need to add an aide in there. If he goes to the self-contained classroom, which already has one aide, we know we're going to have to add an aide in there because of the students who are already in there and the severity of the needs that they already have. So we haven't just analyzed this willy-nilly. We've actually looked at what do these classes look like? Who are the children who are already in these classes? What are the teachers going to have? We'd be at, what'd you say, 89% capacity anyway, but the basis on which we're asking for this is that we're going to have to add staff. And I would feel so much better about it if I felt like Forest City had been given the opportunity to come to these conclusions with this student also and work with him, because my experience with Forest City is that they would have. That, you know, they go through the steps. You try the least restrictive thing first, and then you move on up the ladder as you need to. And I think had they been given the full time with this student, that mom might feel differently about needing to move from Forest City.
Typically, when a student comes in, you don't put them in the most restrictive. You start in the least restrictive and move. And since he hasn't been in a traditional public school, at this point, that's hard to determine.
I start to say and you know, when you're taking a child out of homeschool, that is a very difficult transition for any child to move from homeschool back to a regular public school. And I sure wouldn't drop this kid into the regular milieu and expect him to do well. Can I answer questions?
Mr. Pekron, do you have a question?
Not at this time.
Ms. McAdoo? Dr. Moore?
Yeah, so I know this is difficult all around, but so Wynn School District has not been in any contact with a student, is that correct?
With the actual student,
Yes.
no. We've gotten all our information from the parent or from the Forest City School District.
Okay.
And I had a lengthy conversation with the Forest City School District Special Ed Supervisor, about what the potential needs for this child are.
And so at that point in time, was Forest City Special Ed Coordinator, did they tell you that the child needed a one-to-one?
No, but they were open to admitting that what was being tried wasn't working. That they were going to have to go somewhere else with it. And of course, she said, then the child gets pulled out.
Right.
And the information I was given is that he was pulled out twice. He was pulled out right after that consultant came, and they didn't have him for the rest of that year. And then he started in fall of 18 and went for a little while. Is that right?
No, he's been pulled out twice.
Okay. I'm just telling you, I got different information than what they've given here.
Okay, but so at this point in time, you can say that the reason why Wynn overturned the student is because of capacity to hire an aide, or because of capacity in a special
Because
ed
it's
classroom?
strictly if we have to hire additional staff.
Okay, not capacity in a special ed.
Not
self-contained
capacity
classroom.
in a special education classroom. Unless it means we're gonna have to hire a staff. And when I say capacity in a special ed classroom, I'm talking about Arkansas Department of Education limitations on how many students and teachers you can have.
Right.
A teacher can only have, say, 10 students in a particular special ed class. I'm not talking about that kind of capacity. I'm talking about, are we gonna have to add a teacher, or are we gonna have to add an aide?
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Williamson?
I don't think anything right now.
Ms. McFettridge? Ms. Dean? Dr. Hill? Ms. Newton?
Mine's a question, but it's thinking out loud as a teacher, and maybe get some other comments from other teachers on the board. Whenever I got a student who had problems or whatever, I always tried real hard not to prejudge and have low expectations. I always wanted high. I always set my expectations high to try to get the best I could ever get out of every student. And it really seems like to me, without ever meeting the student at all, without ever having any contact with this child, that we are setting expectations low on what he is going to be able to do. And if the consultant has not recommended a staff or an aide, I'm just thinking that we are not giving this child the benefit of the doubt that something that he may be able to rise up to those expectations if we set them high enough. And so that's my thought process there.
The only thing I would comment to that is all of the evidence that we do have runs in the other direction. And let me tell you, in looking at this child, I think this child has significant capacity. And I think if we could give him the support he needed, and I'm thinking the one-on-one support, because I'm not thinking that he's going to be in a self-contained classroom with children who don't have grade level expectations. I'm thinking he's going to be able to meet grade level expectations if we can provide the behavioral support for him to be able to regulate his emotional status. And I do believe that, based on what I read, I do believe that is part of his disability. The emotional dysregulation is not a choice he's making, it's part of the disability. And, when you look at, I don't think it's saying I don't think it's lowering expectations to think he may need the support of an aide. I think that's just a classroom support, what special ed says, in the least restrictive setting he can be in, with the accompaniment of aides that will support him. And so I think that's what it's going to take. And I'm going to tell you that this LEA supervisor, who's here with me today, she does this analysis because she has a budget, she's got people, she's got to come up with kids that have to be placed, teachers that have to be placed, so that when we start August 19th, whenever it is, we have a good idea of what we're going to need to serve the kids that we have. And special ed kids have the right to FAPE on day 1, not day 21. Other questions?
I have a question for
Okay, Mr.
Secretary Key. What is the funding difference with a special needs child versus a regular education child?
Well,
What is
an easy question, Commissioner. I'm glad she asked
Thank you, Ms. Tree. Well, I can tell you that in the formula, the foundation formula, 2.9 teachers are allocated in funding to go with that within the matrix. But then you also have funding, as you all a couple of months ago had the consideration of the rules for catastrophic special ed, which those are students where the cost of meeting those educational needs goes above and beyond the typical and routine cost for special ed. So really, I don't think you can say there is a standard cost. Yeah, we could probably run averages to see, but that's going to vary from district to district and year to year, depending on the status of those students or the individual needs of those students.
I don't think I answered or asked the question properly. Maybe.
Okay.
I know the state funds our special education children differently than regular education students. And we also are allowed federal funds as well.
Correct. The federal funds are, I mean, the state doesn't fund them differently because the cost of the foundation cost of educating all students is captured in that foundation funding matrix. But there are the Title VI-B funds, federal funds that go with that. And again, that's allocated by a formula. Thank you for I knew there was a word. It was a formulaic methodology there. And then the same with the extra funds for catastrophic needs that come and are reimbursed to districts based on what they submit to the department.
One other point I would make is that this is not a situation where we get to the law says we don't have to take a child if we have to add staff. So for me, that's kind of a bottom line given. You know, it's not a discretionary thing. It's not a let's wool it around and think about it thing. It's part of the statute. And, you know, if we're overriding that, then we need to know that that's no longer good law. Because that's the only basis on which we're not taking kids. We took 60 this year, and 6 of them were special ed kids. Only ones we didn't take were the 2 that we'd have to add another staff member for. And let me tell you, in the special ed field, adding another staff member is not the same as adding one in general ed, just because of the shortage that we have in both special ed aides and special ed teachers. If you got one that's looking for a job, send me their name. Any other questions?
Mr. Peckron, did you have any questions?
Well, I think y'all done made up your mind already that you're not gonna accept Carson.
No, ma'am,
I'm sorry.
we're still discussing and asking questions. I'm sorry if you were given that impression. I'm sorry, Mr. Peckron, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry, I was on mute again. I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, Dr. Hill?
We always reference to you when it comes down to this your level of expertise, and I really want to know, I know you know, Chair, but what's your perception based on what you've heard? Because you've studied this more, so you're more astute than what we are.
My experience is that the best way to make decisions about each child as an individual is actually working with each child as an individual. I adhere to what Ms. Newton is saying about never lowering expectations, but I also know that making decisions based on paperwork is not always true. Sometimes they need more, sometimes they need less. A year or a year and a half of growth with a child that has a disability of any kind, and this one's other health impaired, is, you know, you're in the district where I supervise the program, we erred on the side of the child, and then if things didn't progress, or if it became evident that they needed more or less than what we thought on the beginning, then we adjusted based on that. Does that help?
And I would say one other thing, the one thing this child does not need is to be back in school without what he needs. Or we're liable to lose him to public education altogether.
I have some questions
Dr. Moore
for
has
Jennifer.
another question.
Jennifer, whenever it's her turn.
Okay.
I'm going to sit down unless
It's her
you...
time. I think your time is up. We'll ask a question, and then we'll talk to the resident district.
Okay. Thank you. So I think there's 2 points of decision here. One is whether it is on the student's IEP that they need a one-to-one. But I think the thing that's troubling me is that in a different situation, if it was on the IEP that they needed a one-to-one and that child chose school choice, they would always be denied because the law says if you need it, I'd hire additional staff. Is that correct?
Well,
I would like to answer that question in relation to this specific item.
Okay,
But,
if she addresses that to you, then we will, but right now it's
we
to
don't,
Ms.
I
Newton.
mean, you know, if that was on the IEP.
Miss Street, I think referenced the staff. What we're looking at there is 6/18/1903. There's, I think it's section B. It says that, you know what, instead of quoting.
I got it here. It's to add teacher, staff, or classrooms.
We're less worried about time and more worried about accuracy.
Absolutely. Right. It says this subchapter does not require a school district to add teachers, staff, or classrooms in any way to exceed the requirements and standards established by existing law. And that's at a subsection C, not B. The question here is, if we are looking at an aid, is that a requirement to add staff is essentially what we're asking.
Yeah. And so that is, I mean, if it, and this, it's not, but if it was on a child's IEP that they had to have an aid, a district could always reject it and say, we can't accept you because of that. Is that correct?
It's up to the board. The board can always consider these things as they come to them. It's up to the board, essentially, what you do during an appeal.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Put you in a tough spot.
Someone please ask me that question.
Yeah, sure. You may answer.
Let me tell you how that would not be.
Microphone, please.
How that would not be the case. For example, we had an aide accompanying a child in high school. That child graduated last year, so we have an aide without an assignment.
Okay.
That aide gets assigned to the child.
Okay.
So if we had to add an aide who we could move around and put with that child, then they'd get in, because we wouldn't have had to add staff. And that happens all the time, because kids with disabilities move out of the district, kids graduate, a lot of things happen that leaves us with extra aides.
Okay. And just
Not this time.
to be clear, typically, if a student has an IEP, it's going to say they need that classroom aid in a self-contained.
Not
Dr. Moore,
necessarily.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Would you
Sorry, yes.
speak more clearly?
So
Thank you.
would a child need to, would it say on the IEP that the child needed the one-to-one?
Sometimes it does, but sometimes it does not, especially now that we've gotten to the place where we add aides to classroom rather than giving the child a specific aid. But yes, sometimes we get an application that says this child will need an aid. Then the question is, have we got an aid we can put with that child? If we do, then they don't get rejected.
Okay. When a student transfers into a district, do they receive a new IEP, or is it always carried
If it's
over?
coming directly from a district, we are to implement the IEP to the extent that we can until we do our own evaluation and come up with our own programming, and there's a 60-day, 90-day total limit to get that done. This child came in without an IEP because he's been out of school for a year, so
Right,
we don't
so-
have any.
So whichever district, wherever the student attends.
Wherever
if they're
he
in public school,
attends,
they'll
he
have to
will,
get a new
he will
IEP.
go in, there will be a 90-day evaluation period, and then all of this will be in place. But with this child, if he came into our district, we would temporarily identify him until we got all that done, because we know he's going to need some assistance.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Zook, could we have somebody from Disability Rights kind of speak to that same question that we were talking about? Because I think they have more of a statewide view. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Do you want to hear from the resident district first, or do you want to hear from them first while we're on that
While
topic?
we're talking on that topic.
Okay, you may come forward. I think she said disability rights.
Yeah, I guess ours, because it seems to be what they're saying is they would provide.
Identify yourself and pull up the
Oh,
microphone.
sorry.
There you go.
I am Reagan Stanford with Disability Rights. It appears that what they're saying is they would provide a one-on-one aid if it was available, even if it's not on a student's IEP. That is not something that we've traditionally seen. Student districts are not going out of their way to provide one-on-one aids for students. And so I would be interested to know how many students with behavioral issues currently attending WIN have a one-on-one. Since they've decided that this child needs a one-on-one, I feel confident that if the situation was turned and we were arguing that the child needed a one-on-one that was already in their school district strictly for behavioral issues, we would be at a different hearing. But that is the presumption that they've made in this case, but not what we typically see in districts.
I guess my question was, have you seen other students with IEPs denied because they would have to have an aid? Have you had any cases like that come before?
For school choice?
Yes.
We have not. But I think that, I mean, if their IEP specifically said they had to have a one-on-one aid, so that would require a school district to hire, additional staff. I mean, I think we take issue with that for different reasons, but would it, concede that that would be the addition of staff, and under the law as it's written, they would not be required to accept that kid. But that's not the case here. They are completely speculating that this child would need additional staff.
Was this child in virtual school or homeschool?
He was in homeschool.
Thank you. All right, resident district, there you come.
I'm kind of at a loss as to where to start because I've been shotgunned here with things that I want to speak to first. So let me answer the real easy one first. According to our records, and by the way, I'm Brad Beavers for Forest City School District. Our records, the student was never back enrolled in our district after February of 2018. I think that's a very minor point that was raised as to whether he came back in the fall of 2018 or not, but we don't show any enrollment. As to the issue of, to speak to Ms. Newton's or point of expecting the worst, and I mean, I think that in our position would be that the last IEP does not call for a one-on-one aid. We've heard some statements from the parent as to improvement. We've heard some speculative reviews that are very educated speculation that it would require an aid, but nevertheless it is just a review, and it's of documents which are, again, from 2017. So we don't really know whether basically what we've heard is we don't know if we're going to need an aid, but because we might need an aid, then we don't have the capacity. Now, as to a statement that I made, I want it clear that what I said is anecdotally, we have heard that special ed applications are being rejected. Now, I have now heard that there were 2 rejected this year. That may or may not be correct. I don't know. Oddly enough, the 2 I saw that I can speak to myself happened to be special ed rejections. Okay, so maybe I saw the only 2 that were rejected, and maybe the only 2 in the history of choice I saw were special ed. So that, I admitted to you on the front end that was anecdotally, okay? So there we go. So as far as this goes, what we have heard as I have sat here with you all day is people who have come and said, this receiving district accepted 1 sibling, and I really want my other children to go to school there. And what we have here is parents that said, I got 2 kids already going to the Wynn District. They accepted them, but now my 3rd kid comes, and because my 3rd kid might need some services, and we reviewed some 2-year-old records that say that, well, we can't take them because we might have to hire another aide. And that's what I'm hearing as I'm sitting here. Take that with the grain of salt that I represent the resident district, and I told you the first thing I said when I stood up, we're the resident district, and if you send this child back to us, we're gonna educate this child. Whether we have to hire a new aide, whether we don't have to hire a new aide. We're gonna, within 90 days, as Ms. Street said, we're gonna do a new IEP, and we're gonna make that determination. If we have to hire a new aide, we're gonna write the check and hire a new aide. So that's where I'm gonna leave it with you, but I am gonna remind you of what you have been listening to all day about siblings. And that's what this lady's argument boils down to, in my view, as I sat in the back of the room all day. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have a question for him? No, they did not. That's fine. You're good. Okay, further discussion, questions for any of those who presented? Mr. Peckman?
I have a question.
Okay.
Why is my son not good enough to go to Wynn when Wynn has the resource classes? And all of my other children are going to Wynn. Why is he not good enough to go to Wynn?
Those are the things that this appeals process listen to all sides and then weigh and take a vote. So let's see how it turns out, and as we let the board ask questions if they have any. Is that okay for you? Okay. Board members? Any further questions? Okay, Mr. Peckron?
I've got a really more of a comment than anything. You know, I'm struggling on this because I see a tension in the statute between the statute that says transfers are not to be denied on the basis of disability, and then we have one that says staff shall not be required to be added. But as we know, there are some students who, because of their disability, will necessarily require an additional staff person be added. And it seems like the position that's being adopted by the Wynn District would prevent those students from ever participating in school choice. And so I'm just trying to work through that in my mind as to how, if we assume that the student does need an aide, which I'm not sure is the proper assumption at this point, but even if we assumed we did, are we then saying that student is never allowed to participate in school choice because the student would necessarily require an aide? And then if so, are we then denying the student the ability to participate in school choice based upon the disability?
Okay, thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Ms. Dean?
I have 3 things I want to say, that 3 things that I'm looking at. First thing that Mr. Beavers mentioned, that was one of the first things that I was thinking about, is there are already 2 siblings at Wynn already. So the grandmother has already taken 2 children to Wynn. So that, to me, is a factor of why this child should be accepted at Wynn. Number 2, the consultant that Forest City did not recommend additional staff. That's my understanding, or for one-on-one. And number 3, Wynn has not evaluated this child, so it's pure speculation as to whether or not an additional aid is needed. So based on also agreeing with what Ms. Zook said, this should be done on a child-by-child basis. And since Wynn has not evaluated this child, and the last professional evaluation that was done does not include adding an additional staff member, when the appropriate time comes, I will be making the motion to approve the transfer, because I don't see any reason why this child should not be allowed to go to Wynn.
Dr. Hill? Ms. Newton?
She read my notes.
Okay, she read your notes. Ms. McAdoo? Dr. Moore? Mr. Williamson? Ms. McFetridge? Commissioner? Ms. Dedman, anything further we need to deal with?
You can continue with further discussion, or you can welcome a motion.
Okay, I will welcome a motion, and if there is need for discussion before we vote, please make sure I get your attention. Okay, I will accept motion.
I move to accept this transfer.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Dean. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Newton. Roll call.
Mr. Peckron,
Yeah.
Dr. Hill, Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. McFetridge,
Yes.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Ms. Newton,
Yes.
Ms. Dean.
Yes.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passed. The young Luker child will be able to attend the Wynn School District. And I appreciate all of those of you who attended. And I have no question that all of you were honest brokers in this, and it happens. Thank you very much. Okay, we have one item left and then a time for public comment. If it's okay with the board, I'll go ahead and take that item and public comment before we adjourn. Is that all right? Everybody good with that? Okay.
Yeah.
It's your lucky day, Mr. Taylor, or Mr. Dugan, sorry. Taylor was my grandmother's maiden name, so I have that in my head. All right, you may present item number 2.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Taylor Dugan, attorney with the Division of Elementary and Secondary Education. What I have in front of the board today are some emergency rules, and these emergency rules deal with Act 628 of 2019. That was the law that was passed that would give the board the authority to reinstate an educator's license if it has been revoked. The reason we're asking for these rules to be emergency is because there's educators out there that could benefit from this being in effect sooner rather than later. One thing I learned recently too is if someone has a revoked license, they can't even volunteer at the school. So these emergency rules provide that someone who had their license revoked, but it doesn't include a violent offense, it doesn't include a sexual offense, could still go through the process that's outlined in these rules to get their license back. And so if the board has questions as far as for these rules, they're going to be incorporated into the final licensure rules that we are drafting at the moment. And these will be incorporated into Section 5 of those rules.
Questions? Ms. Newton?
I had one question. It was just something I wasn't real clear on. Have you got them in front of you?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay. It's at 53025.
Yes, ma'am. That is, so for example, let's take a teacher that had a standard license. They would have to complete the 36 hours of professional development on top of the other requirements.
Okay. What my question was, when it says at the time of application for an initial certification, is it the time that they had the initial certification previously, or is it this time? That was what I was unclear of. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am, it does make sense. I do have Ms. Melissa Jacks. To my understanding, Ms. Jacks, our interpretation of that is currently right now.
So it would be current, okay. All right, that was what I wanted to be sure of.
We were kind of trying to treat these as like an expired license or a suspended license.
Okay. That
Are
was
there
my only
other
question.
questions?
I
Dr.
do.
Moore?
I just want to double check. So this is a discretionary process by the state board, correct? So it's
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
okay, and then this is always sought out by the applicant. It's nothing that the department's going to go back and
Correct.
these
So,
people, is that
an
correct?
excuse me, an educator, it would have to have been 10 years since their license had been revoked. So they still would have that 10 years if they were revoked recently. But yes, the applicant would be the educator, and they would have to provide the things in these rules that it sets out. And then they would have a hearing in front of the board, and then the board would get to make that determination on whether or not they wanted to reinstate this person's license or give them the ability to get their license back.
Okay. And if reinstated, is their future license the same as any license, or is that treated differently?
It depends if they had a provisional license, if they had a standard license. To my understanding, Ms. Jackson, we're looking at this as a standard license.
Okay.
Correct.
Would there be a probation period?
You know, we have not thought about that as far as whether or not the board could put the person on probation as far as if they reinstated their license. So, would you know, Ms. Freno? I don't see why they couldn't.
If,
The commissioner has an opinion.
well, I would just say that keep in mind that these emergency rules are going in, but we are promulgating permanent rules.
Okay.
That may be something, if this board wants us to take and look at in permanent rules, then we could add that. But just to give you background, remember, we had the gentleman that came, I think, in the July meeting and hoped that he could ask you all to grant him some sort of waiver. But the law had not gone into effect yet. This is an attempt to create an avenue on a quicker basis for that gentleman or others like him to come and seek. But this would not be the permanent rule. So if you want to the team to go back and look at a probationary status period, they can do that as part of the permanent process.
I think that might be wise to think about.
Yes, I agree.
I think particularly if it was revoked while they were on their probationary time, as opposed to if they taught 15 years and were going back into the same field. So an opportunity for us to weigh that would likely be appreciated and well received.
Yes, ma'am.
Others? Do we have a motion? Ms. Newton moves to approve the rules to go, okay, the emergency rules, and then the others will come back to us. Okay,
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
all right. Ms. Donovan, do you have that? All right. Do I have a second? Second. Ms. McFettridge, second. Ms. Newton moved. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, Ms. Freno, do we have any public comment of which you are aware?
No, Ms. Zook, there is no public comment.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Luker, if you're still on the phone, thank you very much, and you can go on about your day now. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So
Have a motion by Ms. McFettridge, second by Ms. Dean. All those in favor? Aye. So moved.
Right.
Well,